So you went through something really tough. Maybe it was a really hard breakup that you had trouble recovering from, and maybe you had some trauma from. Maybe it was trauma. Maybe you went through something really awful as a kid. Maybe it was abuse. Maybe it was a car accident. Maybe it was assault. Something really, really awful happened to you, whether it was when you were younger or more recently. Maybe an illness that you went through, and you found that the way to process that and to work through that and to feel better was to create something. So you felt the need to write your story, to write a book about it, to write poetry about it, to create art, to create Facebook posts, to create a blog. Something that was creative and took the pain and did something with it. Maybe that helped others along the way and it helped you to process it. So this is something that has come up in a few different ways, which is really interesting since the last video I did on what to tell and not tell about your past. So I had a few people reach out to me and say that they went through something really difficult and then they found creative outlets to process that and to talk about that in. And from there, they struggled a little bit with either how much to say, what to edit, or with some of the response that they got from doing that. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what to do if you've been through something really hard and you found a creative outlet like this and you're struggling with kind of what to share and what not to share and how to do that and how to decide. So this comes up a lot in different ways, and I've worked with this a lot in different ways, particularly with people who have been through rape or assault. I found this to be the case, that they want to write about it or they want to share something. Obviously not everyone, but some people, that's how they process through this, is they want to get it out there and they want to share some of that stuff. So I've thought of a few past things that I've worked with. One woman ended up writing a whole series of poetry about what she went through in her assault, and it was super healing for her and really great. But then when she started posting them on Facebook, she got either some, comments that were like, oh, thank you so much for sharing this, like this is helping me so much, or people who were really loving to her and like wanting to help her, or she got some people who were triggered by it and didn't like it, or people who felt like she was oversharing. So that is the balance that we have to find in all of this. We don't want to trigger people in our process of creating and healing, and we also don't want to, I guess, offend people, but that's not really our problem, I guess. So I never want people to, and I try to help them not worry about what other people think, because we worry way too much about what other people think. But in this case, you also kind of need to be aware of it. Not what other people think necessarily, but how it may impact others, because we don't want to cause harm, right? We don't want to cause more harm, and maybe we also don't really want those people reading our stories and our pain. So one tip that I have is just to be mindful of who is seeing what you're posting or what you're sharing or what you're writing or what you're creating. Who is seeing that, and are you okay with that? So you can't control their reactions, but you can think about, am I okay with my grandma reading about this, or my friends from high school, or am I okay with them reading my really deep pain and my all about my trauma and maybe details and that kind of thing? Am I okay with that? Is that okay for me? Or does it feel better to publish it somewhere else or post it somewhere else? What do I want and need and feel like is best for me within that? So being really mindful of that, I think, is important. A lot of people also do this anonymously, like they post things anonymously, or they submit to these bigger campaigns that showcase art or poetry or writing that captures trauma and captures people's experiences. One really powerful one that I used when I worked in a treatment center for sexual addictions and perpetrators was we would take them to an art exhibit that was done all by survivors, and they would make t-shirts. The survivors would make t-shirts, and they would like write a letter to the perpetrator or talk about what happened to them. And some of them were really, kick the table. Some of them were so powerful and intense. You know, it would be like, you took away my life, essentially. Like, I wish you would have just killed me because you took away everything from me. Or, you know, they would be written to specific people, like, I can't believe you did that to me, Dad. I spent a lifetime trying to get over what happened to me. So it would be different things like that, but it would be whatever the person was feeling, and maybe directing it to the perpetrator, maybe talking about what they went through and how they got through that, whatever the person wanted to express, they would write on these t-shirts. And then these t-shirts were hung in rows, so it would be like, I don't know, 3-4 rows solid of t-shirts, and just aisles and aisles and aisles of them in this huge auditorium. So many t-shirts and so many victims and so many stories. So we would take the guys there that had perpetrated on people, we would take them there and show them what survivors were feeling and thinking, and because it's hard for some people to connect to that. They are only thinking about their thoughts, their needs, all of that. They don't connect to how it's impacting the victim. So we would have them connect with that and see that and talk about it. And I would usually have my guys find some shirts that represented what their victims probably felt, so we could talk about that and work through that. And that either worked really well or didn't land at all, right? So sometimes it would really hit them, and you know, they would be super emotional, and it would just really hit something in them that they hadn't thought of before, or that they thought of in a new way now, especially if it was someone that they also cared about. So maybe they perpetrated on a sibling or a friend or something, and they didn't connect with how that made that person feel until that moment. So that'd be really powerful. And sometimes it just wouldn't be at all, and they would be disrespectful or, you know, dismissive or minimizing, or, you know, just really not appropriate with it. So that, I think, is an example of creating art from a survival, this is what I went through standpoint, that can be really powerful, but also can be received really poorly. But it's so intense and so raw. So I would hate for the people who created those shirts to have been there and hear some of the stuff that was going on, and maybe some of the disrespect that happened. I think that would be really unhealthy. Or like have their names attached to it in that venue. But because it was anonymous, and because it was a quiet space, and because they weren't there, we could go and we could try to use it and help and kind of create good from that. So because it was anonymous, and because the survivors weren't negatively impacted from, you know, what was going on, instead they got to create and put it out there and feel like they were doing something and making a difference, and also processing and getting their pain out there. I think that was really positive. So sometimes I think it's helpful to be anonymous, to submit your stuff anonymously, to put it out there anonymously. And sometimes it's just good to own it, right? There's so many people, and I'm usually really impressed by these people, especially when they've been through really hard things, that just own their stuff, sign their name on it, put it out there. This is me, this is who I am. I think there's also a lot of power in that, and you have to be prepared at the backlash and the negativity that can come from that. So I would say, if you're going to do that, sign your name to it and put it out there. Make sure you have some support around you, so if negativity comes back at you, or if some just not great stuff comes back at you, you can work through that and stay strong and find strength within that whole process. So just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. You have some support. You maybe join some support groups. You see a therapist. You talk to your friends. You make sure your self-care is on point. So when you do put that out there, you can handle some of the stuff that comes back at you. And I think that's also some time for more creating and, you know, writing out, this has been a process. This is the positives that have come out of it. This is the negatives. This is the stuff that I didn't expect coming up, or some of the issues that I didn't expect to come up, and just use that as healing. Some of it's going to be really positive and build you up, and some of it is probably going to be hard, but use that to keep healing and keep growing and keep kind of progressing in your healing and in your journey. So those are some of my thoughts on that. I hope that helps some of you. I really appreciate all of you who reached out to me about this and kind of shared your story within it, and I appreciate kind of the different views that are coming up from these topics, and being able to talk to kind of different people and populations within this, because there's so many kind of variations of this. So thank you for reaching out to me. And if you want to reach out to me as well, or submit a question anonymously, you can go to truetoucounseling.com. Thanks, guys.